Sarah adjusted her sunglasses, her smile wide for the man across the restaurant booth, then dismissed my stunned gaze with a flick of her wrist. The world blurred, the Ohio diner fading into a cold mist. She'd chosen him, openly, leaving me raw and exposed. "You were always too predictable, Frank," she murmured, before turning back to her new life. Frank Miller often thought about the 15 years he and Sarah had been married. Their life in suburban Ohio, to an outsider, looked perfect. A 2-story colonial with a well-maintained lawn, 2 cars in the driveway, and 2 bright daughters. Emily, 13, was already showing Sarah's quick wit, and Jenny, 10, had Frank's quiet thoughtfulness. They had built this life brick by brick, a deliberate construction. He remembered meeting Sarah in their junior year of college. She had an ambition that sparked against his more measured nature. He was drawn to her drive, while she seemed to appreciate his quiet, steady devotion. After graduation, they found their footing. Frank in software development, Sarah in marketing. They worked hard. They bought their first house, then upgraded. The girls arrived, filling the rooms with a different kind of sound. In their circle, they were that couple, the ones who had it all figured out, a testament to what focus and partnership could achieve. The changes started subtly, like a hairline crack in a foundation, easy to ignore at first. Sarah's hours at the office grew longer. The occasional late night became more frequent. Her wardrobe shifted, replacing comfortable, practical clothes with tailored, expensive pieces, sleek and formal. She started hitting the gym 5 mornings a week, sometimes 6, her frame growing leaner, harder. She talked about self-care and career trajectory, words that used to be less prominent in their shared vocabulary. Frank noticed smaller things too, details that pricked at him. Her phone, once left on the kitchen counter, was now always in her hand or tucked away, face down. A goodnight kiss, a ritual for years, started to feel awkward. She'd turn her head slightly, offering her cheek, or pull away with a murmured, "I'm so tired, honey." He'd lie in bed, listening to the house settle, a quiet unease growing in the space between them. Then came the Anderson account. A crucial client meeting, Sarah said. She was out late that Tuesday. Then again on Thursday. She arrived home past 11, smelling faintly of a restaurant, not just work. The next morning, at the kitchen island, Emily picked at her cereal. "Mom, you said we'd work on my science project last night." Sarah, already dressed for work, grabbed her briefcase. "I know, sweetie. It was a crucial meeting. We'll find time this weekend, I promise." Her voice was light, a practiced cheerfulness. Jenny, still in her pajamas, looked up, her lower lip trembling slightly. Sarah didn't seem to notice, kissing their foreheads quickly before heading for the door. "Love you, girls," she called, already halfway out. That afternoon, a quiet moment in his office, Frank found himself on LinkedIn. He searched for Anderson account. The company came up easily. Their recent news section showed a press release, dated 2 months prior, announcing the successful acquisition by a larger firm. The Anderson account was closed, absorbed, finished. He stared at the screen, the words blurring, then cleared his browser history. He told himself it was paranoia, an overactive imagination. Sarah was busy. She was ambitious. He was just being insecure. He put it away, buried it deep. A week later, Frank was in Mike Johnson's garage, helping him change the oil in his old Mustang. Mike, his face smudged with grease, tightened a bolt. "Brother, something's not right with Sarah." Mike didn't mince words. He rarely did. Frank kept his eyes on the lug nuts. "She's just busy, Mike. Work's intense." Mike grunted, wiping his hands on a rag. "Busy, yeah. You know, Brenda saw her the other night. Not at your place." Frank felt a cold knot tighten in his gut. "What are you talking about?" Mike pulled out his phone, navigating to Instagram. "She posted this a few days ago." He held the screen out. It was Sarah, laughing, at a beach restaurant, sunglasses on. In the reflection of her dark lenses, clear as day, was a man holding a camera. The caption read, "Amazing business conference." The date below the photo was last Thursday. Sarah had told him she was at a women's business conference in Chicago that week. He looked at the phone, then at Mike, then back at the image. The sand, the palm trees, the clearly male reflection. A beach. Not Chicago. Still, a desperate, fading hope clung to him. It had to be a mistake. Father's Day weekend arrived, smelling of freshly cut grass and impending summer. Frank had planned a trip to Lake Erie's sandy shores with Emily and Jenny, a tradition they cherished. Sarah, however, had other plans. She announced it over Tuesday night dinner, her voice soft but firm. "I'm going to a special intensive yoga retreat this weekend. For my mental health." She looked at him, her eyes tired. "I just need to clear my head, Frank. You understand, don't you?" He nodded. Of course he did. He wanted her to be happy, to feel less burdened. He even helped her pack her sleek, expensive duffel bag on Friday morning, folding her workout clothes, zipping the compartments. He watched her drive off, a faint sense of unease still prickling, but he pushed it down. She deserved peace. Saturday evening, the sun dipping below the horizon, painting the lake in hues of orange and purple. The girls were settled in their rented cottage. Emily called from the other room, her voice tight with panic. "Dad, I forgot my allergy medicine. My nose is already getting itchy." Frank felt a familiar surge of parental responsibility. Emily's allergies could turn a fun weekend into a misery. "All right, sweetie. Don't worry. It's only a 2-hour drive. I'll swing by the house and grab it. I'll be back before you know it." He hugged Jenny, told them to get ready for bed, and promised to call when he was on his way back. He expected Sarah to be hours away, deep in some restorative yoga pose, miles from home. The drive back was long, the road a dark ribbon under the stars. He pulled into their familiar driveway, the headlights sweeping across the front of the house. And then he saw it. Sarah's silver sedan, the one he'd surprised her with on their 10th anniversary, parked neatly by the garage. A cold dread, sharp and sudden, settled in his stomach, pushing out the last vestiges of the lake's calm. The yoga retreat, the mental health, it was a lie. He sat there for a moment, the engine idling, the silence of the suburban street pressing in. He pulled out his phone, his thumb shaky as he opened the family tracking app. His finger hovered over Sarah's icon. The little blue dot was there. Not hundreds of miles away, but barely 20 minutes from their house. It showed her at the Crossroads, their favorite Italian spot downtown. The place where they'd celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, promotions, the place where he'd proposed. He swallowed, the taste in his mouth metallic. Frank turned the car around, his mind a jumble of disbelief and a desperate, frantic hope. Maybe she had come back early. Maybe the retreat was canceled. Maybe she was meeting a girlfriend, someone from the office. There had to be a reasonable explanation. He drove slowly, the city lights blurring past. The Crossroads was a well-known spot, always busy on a Saturday night. Parking would be difficult. He told himself to turn back, to go get Emily's medicine, to ignore this burgeoning horror, but he couldn't. His hands were gripping the wheel, his knuckles white. He finally found a spot a block away, near the alley. He walked quickly, his heart thudding against his ribs. The restaurant's neon sign glowed, casting a reddish hue on the pavement. He rounded the corner, the valet parking area coming into view. And there it was, his anniversary gift to her, her silver sedan, gleaming under the streetlights. His eyes scanned the other cars. 3 spaces over, a sleek black sedan, a high-end model he didn't recognize, caught his eye. It looked expensive, new. He approached the restaurant, trying to appear casual, like any other passerby. He peered through the large front window, past the hostess stand, past the bustling tables, his breath hitched. There she was. Sarah. She was wearing the red dress he'd bought her last Christmas, the one she said was too flashy for most occasions. She looked radiant, her hair styled perfectly, a genuine, unburdened laugh escaping her lips, visible even through the glass. Her head was tilted back slightly, her face alight. Across from her, a man sat. He was younger, Frank estimated, maybe late 30s, early 40s. His suit was impeccably tailored, a crisp white shirt, no tie, a glint of gold on his wrist, an expensive watch. He was leaning forward, his eyes fixed on Sarah, a possessive smile on his face. And then Frank saw it. The man's hand, large and confident, was covering hers on the table, his thumb gently stroking her knuckles. Sarah didn't pull away. She just laughed again, a sound Frank hadn't heard from her, truly heard, in years. She looked happier, more alive, more vibrant than he had seen her since their wedding day. Frank sat in his car, engine off, the windows fogging slightly with the night's dampness. Through the restaurant glass, Sarah's laughter was a silent movie, a cruel pantomime. The younger man, his face now clearer in the ambient light, leaned in closer, his words unheard but his intent obvious. Frank felt a profound numbness, a cold spread from his chest. The world outside the restaurant, the street, the passing cars, the rest of his life, it all shrank, condensed into this single devastating tableau. Every late night, every whispered excuse, every distant glance now coalesced into a sharp, undeniable truth. His hands were clenched on the steering wheel, knuckles white. The logical part of his brain screamed at him to start the car, to drive away, drive back to the lake, pick up his daughters, and pretend none of this had ever happened. For them, he thought. For Emily and Jenny. To preserve the illusion, the fragile peace of their world. He almost turned the key, but then, the man leaned further across the table. His hand, which had been covering Sarah's, now cupped her cheek. He kissed her. Not a quick peck, but a lingering, intimate kiss. Sarah closed her eyes, her head tilting into his touch. She kissed him back. With a passion Frank remembered from long ago. From their college days. From the early years of their marriage. A raw, uninhibited warmth he hadn't felt from her in what felt like a lifetime. It was a complete surrender, a public display of ownership. The last shred of denial within Frank's mind shattered. He didn't confront them. He didn't storm into the restaurant, didn't cause a scene. There was no rage, only a hollow ache. He started the car, pulled out of the parking spot, and drove home. The silence in the car was deafening, broken only by the hum of the tires on the asphalt. Each mile was a physical weight, pressing him deeper into the seat. Once in his quiet, darkened house, Frank went straight to the liquor cabinet. He poured himself a large measure of the expensive bourbon Sarah had given him for Christmas. A single-barrel rye he'd admired but rarely touched. The amber liquid swirled in the glass, catching the faint light from the street lamp outside. He took a long swallow, the burn a welcome distraction from the cold dread in his stomach. Then, a grim determination settled over him. He pulled his laptop from his briefcase, the screen's sudden glow harsh in the darkness. He opened his browser, his fingers, still trembling slightly, typed in a name. Paul Jenkins. He remembered the name from a subtle hint Sarah had dropped months ago, a casual mention of a new competitor in her field. It didn't take long. Social media. News articles. Professional profiles. The internet, a vast, unforgiving archive, laid it all bare. Paul Jenkins, 34, recently divorced, a senior partner at a rival marketing firm. His profile picture showed a confident, almost arrogant smile. Frank clicked through. Their digital footprints were everywhere, subtly woven into the fabric of their online lives. Hidden replies on old posts, 2 friendly LinkedIn exchanges, check-ins at various local spots, some of which Sarah had claimed to visit with clients or girlfriends. They were careful, he noted, but not careful enough. Or perhaps, he thought, taking another swallow of the burning bourbon, they had simply stopped caring about being caught. The evidence mounted, each click of the mouse adding another brick to the wall of his despair. The front door finally opened, a quiet click in the stillness of the house, footsteps in the hallway. Sarah, humming a light tune, like a carefree teenager returning from a first date. She walked into the living room, her silhouette appearing in the doorway, a shadow against the dim light filtering from the kitchen. She froze when she saw him, sitting in the armchair, the laptop screen a faint glow on his face, the glass of bourbon in his hand. Her humming stopped. The air crackled with unspoken words. He looked up at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. How was the yoga retreat? His voice was unnervingly steady, devoid of inflection. A cold blade in the sudden silence. Sarah's hand froze, poised above the light switch. The hum of the quiet melody she'd been carrying through the house died in her throat. In the dim, street-lit glow of the living room, Frank saw her face drain of all color, like a photograph bleached by too much sun. Her eyes, wide and suddenly wary, found his in the gloom. "Frank, why are you sitting in the dark?" Her voice was thin, fragile, a stark contrast to the carefree sound he'd heard moments before. He took another slow sip of bourbon, the ice clinking softly in the glass. "Emily forgot her allergy medicine," he stated, his voice calm, flat. "I drove back to get it. When I got here, your car was in the driveway." He paused, letting the silence stretch, thick and heavy between them. "I checked the app. It said you were at the crossroads, so I went. And I found you." Sarah offered no denial, no frantic, panicked excuses, no tearful apologies. She simply stood there, stiff and silent. That stoicism, he realized, cut deeper than any desperate lie could have. It was an admission, cold and clear. She straightened her spine, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement, but Frank noticed it. Her chin lifted, a defiant, almost regal tilt he once found incredibly attractive, a sign of her strength. Now it just looked brittle. "I suppose we need to talk," she said, her voice regaining a measure of its usual composure, though a tremor still lingered beneath the surface. Frank laughed then, a humorless, cutting sound that echoed in the quiet room. It felt alien, detached, coming from his own throat. "Talk?" he repeated, his gaze fixed on her. "Talk about what, Sarah? About how you've been lying to me for months? For a year? Maybe? About the Anderson account that closed 2 months ago? About your women's business conference in Chicago that turned out to be a beach vacation?" He set the glass down on the end table, the clink sharp in the silence. "Or maybe we can talk about the money. The sudden increase in your expense reports, the hotels, the dinners. All with your boy toy, I suppose?" He watched her, looking for a crack, a flicker of remorse. But her face remained a mask, albeit a pale one. "Remember Jenny's spring recital?" he continued, his voice steadily rising, a low thrum of controlled anger. "She was so excited, she wanted you there. You said you had a critical client dinner with some out-of-towners. Remember? Jenny cried herself to sleep that night. But you weren't at a client dinner, were you? You were playing happy couple with Paul Jenkins." Sarah's eyes widened, just a fraction, a brief flash of surprise in their depths. The mention of the name had finally broken through her carefully constructed facade. "How did you?" she started, her voice a hushed whisper, trailing off as if the words themselves might incriminate her further. "Does it matter, Sarah?" Frank cut her off, his voice flat, devoid of any warmth. "What matters is that while I was here, taking care of our home, making sure our children had dinner on the table, reading them bedtime stories, you were out there living some sort of fantasy life, a life you clearly found more appealing than the one we built." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his voice dropping to a low, intense tone. "Tell me, Sarah," he challenged, his gaze unwavering. "Was he worth destroying 15 years of marriage for? Was he worth shattering our daughter's world?" Sarah slowly lowered herself onto the edge of the couch, the red fabric of her dress rustling softly. She smoothed the material over her lap, her hands, Frank noticed, visibly trembling. She wouldn't meet his eyes. The defiance was gone, replaced by a fragile stillness. Sarah finally spoke, her voice quiet, almost fragile, as she smoothed the red dress over her trembling hands. "It's not that simple, Frank. Paul and I, we connect on a different level. He understands me in ways you never tried to." The words hit Frank like a physical blow. His voice cracked, filled with a raw mix of fury and profound, bone-deep hurt. "Never tried to?" He pushed himself up from the armchair, his movements stiff. "I spent 15 years trying to understand you, Sarah. I spent 15 years supporting you, loving you, making sure you had everything you needed." He took a step towards her, his voice rising. Remember when your father died? I held you every night for a month. When you had postpartum depression after Jenny, I took every night feeding, changed every diaper, so you could sleep, so you could heal. Every single struggle, every bump in the road, I was there. He stopped, his chest heaving, the air suddenly thick. Do you remember when I got that offer from the Silicon Valley startup, the one that would have changed everything for my career? I turned it down. I turned it down because you wanted to stay here, close to your family, to pursue your marketing dreams. I changed my entire career path, settled for less, so you could soar. His voice was ragged now, trembling with indignation. How dare you say I never tried? Sarah, surprisingly, burst out laughing, a sharp, bitter sound. That's exactly it, Frank. That's precisely it. You're so perfect, so understanding, so predictable. Her eyes, though still red-rimmed, blazed with a frustrated anger of her own. When's the last time you surprised me? When's the last time you made me feel passionate, alive? You just existed. Paul makes me feel young again. Frank, he makes me feel desirable. Frank seized on her words, his voice sharp with accusation. Desirable? And our daughters, Sarah? Do they make you feel old? Is that why you've been neglecting them? Is that why their bedtime stories and science projects suddenly don't matter anymore? Sarah flinched, a visible tremor passing through her. Her composure, which had held so precariously, broke for a brief moment. Don't bring the girls into this, Frank, she insisted, her voice tight, strained. They have nothing to do with this. They have everything to do with it, Frank shouted, standing over her now, his hands shaking. They're watching their mother break promises, lie to their faces, make excuses for why she's never around. They're growing up thinking this is normal. He felt a fresh wave of pain, a deeper, colder hurt. Do you know what Emily told her school counselor last month? She told her she thinks it's her fault you were never around anymore, that she must have done something wrong to make you not want to be home. Sarah's face crumpled, a fleeting glimpse of genuine pain crossing her features. Her eyes welled up, but she quickly blinked it away, her jaw clenching. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a steely resolve Frank recognized from her boardroom demeanor. Look, she said, her voice hardening. Maybe this is for the best. We've been stuck in a rut, Frank. Maybe this is a way out for both of us. She stood, adjusting her dress, her gaze suddenly distant, as if she were pitching a new strategy. I've been thinking, and I know this might sound unconventional to you, but there's a modern way to handle this. Open marriages are becoming more common, Frank. David and I have been talking. For those grappling with the complex web of emotions Frank is experiencing, or those simply drawn to the intricate dance of relationships, stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. Frank cut her off with another sharp, bitter laugh, the sound hollow in the room. Open marriage? You want to legitimize your affair by calling it an open marriage? Is that what Paul told you? That's what he thinks is a good idea? Sarah straightened, her eyes narrowed. It's very evolved, Frank. Very modern. We could both see other people, while maintaining our family unit for the girls. It's what Paul and I have been discussing. She spoke as if reading from a script, her voice calm, detached. As if discussing a business proposal. Frank stared at her, disbelief warring with a fresh surge of anger. Paul thinks? He repeated, his voice low and dangerous. Since when does some guy you're screwing get a vote in our marriage? In our lives? In the future of our daughters? Sarah's composure finally snapped. She stood, her face flushed. He understands me better than you ever did, Frank, she retorted, her voice sharp and wounded. He sees me, truly sees me. Not just the mother or the wife, but the woman. And you know what? This house, our savings, half of it's mine anyway. Ohio is a community property state. Don't think you can just throw me out, Frank, and get away with it. She looked at him defiantly, as if this was her trump card. Frank reached into his pocket, his movements deliberate, unnervingly calm. He pulled out his phone, unlocked it, and navigated to a specific file. He held the screen out towards her, the bright light illuminating her suddenly pale face. It was a digital copy of a document, crisp, and clear. Interesting theory, Sarah, Frank said, his voice completely devoid of emotion. A cold, hard line. Except we're in Ohio, yes, and everything is indeed in my name. Including this. His finger tapped the screen. This is the prenuptial agreement you signed 15 years ago, Sarah. Remember? The one my father, the lawyer, insisted on before we got married. He said it was for future protection. Just in case. Turns out he was right. Sarah stared at the document, her eyes scanning the familiar signatures, her own looping handwriting at the bottom, the detailed clauses. The date. Her face turned ashen, all the color draining away, leaving her skin looking like old parchment. The words she had dismissed as a formality back then, a minor inconvenience before the grand adventure of their life together, now rose up like an unseen trap. The legal reality of her situation, the full, crushing weight of her oversight, crashed down on her. The financial security she had presumed was hers, the comfortable cushion of their shared wealth, evaporated in an instant, leaving her exposed, vulnerable, and suddenly, utterly alone. The defiance in her eyes flickered, then died, replaced by a dawning terror. Frank watched her, his expression impassive. According to this agreement, Sarah, in the event of a divorce due to infidelity, you waive any claim to my premarital assets, which, as you know, account for the vast majority of our current holdings, including the house, the significant portion of our investment portfolio, and all of my inherited property. He spoke slowly, precisely, each word a hammer blow. The agreement also stipulates that primary custody of the children would remain with the non-offending parent, with visitation rights to be determined. And given the evidence I have of your prolonged deception, your neglect of the girls, your current situation, I don't think you'll find a judge in this state who would see things differently. He paused, letting the silence hang. It means you walk away with what you came into the marriage with. Which wasn't much, as you recall. Sarah stared, the prenuptial agreement a stark, undeniable truth. The carefully constructed image of her secure future crumbled. Frank then laid out the financial drain her affair had caused on their joint accounts. Hidden credit card statements, travel costs, all meticulously tracked. I will pursue full custody of Emily and Jenny, he stated, his voice unwavering. Your neglect, the emotional distress you've caused them, it will all be presented. You lied to them, Sarah. She tried to negotiate, her voice thin. Frank, we can work this out for the girls. Please. But he stood firm. The conversation had shifted, no longer about blame, but the cold, hard realities of divorce. Your actions have consequences, he told her, far beyond us. They impact the children you claim to protect. His focus was clear. Rebuilding a stable home for Emily and Jenny, free from deceit. Later, from the guest room, Frank heard Sarah's hushed, desperate call to Paul Jenkins. He listened as Paul's enthusiastic tone grew distant, less convinced by the modern arrangement once the legal and financial complexities were laid bare. A strange mix of sorrow and liberation settled over Frank. The facade was gone, but so was the constant, gnawing ache of doubt. His children's emotional healing became paramount. Therapy. Consistent presence. Unwavering love. He looked towards a difficult but honest future, understanding that while betrayal left scars, the process of paying the price could lead to a new, if changed, kind of peace. He embraced his role as a father, a man who chose integrity over denial. Frank stood on the precipice of a new, uncertain future, but one finally built on honesty. The profound sadness of his marriage's end was a heavy cloak. Yet beneath it, a strange sense of liberation began to stir. The illusion of their perfect life, a fragile construct, was shattered, but so too was the suffocating weight of Sarah's deceit. The constant ache of doubt that had gnawed at him for months. His focus, sharp and clear, shifted entirely to Emily and Jenny. Their healing, their stability, became his paramount concern. He envisioned a home environment where promises were kept, where trust, once fractured, could slowly, painstakingly be rebuilt. He knew the path ahead would be fraught with difficulties. The divorce proceedings, the logistical challenges, the inevitable emotional toll on his daughters. Yet, He felt a quiet strength, a resolve to face these trials with integrity, to lead his girls through the wreckage towards a new, more honest horizon. The betrayal had left scars, deep and undeniable, but Frank understood that sometimes the complete dismantling of a false reality was necessary for true growth. This reshaping of his life was not about revenge, but about reclaiming peace and stability from the ruins of lies. He was ready to navigate the fallout, not as a victim, but as a father committed to forging a new, stronger path for his children. One where truth, however painful, would always prevail.